All right. Week 11, our last week of regular scheduled topics until we get to next week, which is week 12, which is our Dev1. So, for the most part, what I'm going to cover today is my Dev1, just how it looks and what it does. You're welcome to ask me questions about it for sure. That'd be a great time. Now, remember, my Dev1 is not, it's just my interpretation of what I wanted to do for my dev of projects. Remember, I actually really attempt to code things that I want to learn from. So, but I'm just giving you an example. Okay, so I just want to set that clear. And also, the other thing I want to say, just moving forward after we do week 12, which you'll finish up the section 9, and then the week 13, when we come back, we will switch from using our decision code, decision path, I've been calling it, for our Learn Together. And we're going to be doing something different from here on out. Matter of fact, we'll end up doing an ordering system for the first part, which is we're going to cover classes. And then we'll cover asynchronous. We'll cover a way to actually grab to do. So there'll be some other things we do. But, some of you really enjoyed the decision code. Some of you are ready to walk away. I get that. Okay. All right. So let me switch over. Here is my EV charging Dev 1. So the one thing, and this is pretty realistic for what I would want in an app that tracks my charging cost, because typical day is I come in, I just however many batteries I want in the battery. Have a limit. Now this is just output where I set up an object and just display that. But over here is actually more involved because as I enter the data, I'm going to have a summary based on months. Because the idea would be if you're starting this and you've already had a car for, let's say, a year, but you want to go back and enter some of your data because you have had it somewhere else, maybe. And actually, more realistically, these days, there's actually apps that do this that actually just pull the data. But, that's okay too. So I have two ways to enter data, either a quick way. Now, again, you don't have to do two forms. I did because I wanted to. And what I did here is both use the required, right? But I also put in, like if you put 280, which would be above, right? Right? It would give you, it just gives you some more validation data. So remember, all of your inputs need to be validated. You need some kind of above the required. Required is minimal. That's the attribute we've been working on. So you want to make sure you definitely do above, right? Write some custom validation code, right? So in this case, let's say I came in, I had 100 miles left in the battery because I know the current range where I have it set to. I just hit submit. And what happens here is that it shows up, right? So I can go in and edit it. But in this case, I could also delete it. So in that example right there, I did, right, the create, the read it back, right? The update actually would happen over here, and then the delete is here. I still want to work on the update a little bit, but actually the edit update. But the other way is again, if I'm going back now, this is actually just showing the other way this happens is if I did another one and I did 50, right, and I submit that, then it shows the second one, and then over here it's totaling those. But I can also go back. In this case, I could go back a couple months, or even to, let's say, February, right? And I could even give it a time if I wanted to. I could just say, yeah, that's good. I could do supercharger versus home. I could say the miles in the battery was 40, miles after charge is I had 100. Okay. So this is just more input data where this is assuming some data. But when I hit submit here, what's kind of nice, again, using validation for beginning with the required, but then doing custom validation for these entries as well. But here's the other thing you'll notice is that on my output, I actually, or on my rendering, right, rendering of the data that's been given, I show the home charging in a different style as the supercharging. And then over here, I also sum up the by months, like, so if I was to do, so one session from February, right, and then it gives you a total. So once you start doing some historical data, which is kind of cool, let's say I do another one, I'll just do it. I'll do that. We'll do another supercharger. This one, I came in with 3 miles. Ooh, really low. I charged 200, much higher, much more expensive, of course. Yeah, $16 for that one, right? But then you can see the detail here. So, which is kind of cool. I like that, but I could also do the delete and it would re-render each time and recalculate those totals. So in my case, I really was able to. Now I do have an edit, but I'm just working on what I'm going to do about that. I'm not sure yet because I typically would I give them the option to edit after they entered. Yeah, I could see that, but I also feel like giving some output here to show both a difference here and a summary here, right? I'm hitting the update part of this because the U and the E, right? So update is not as explicit as edit, and I'm actually a little more like flexible in that area. So that's why if you're in question, it'd be a great time to come talk to me. And that's why I just wanted to show this. So the other thing I think students may run into, so this might be a good time to actually go look at the Dev1 requirements is, right? So you need at least two kinds of inputs, right? Make sure you write validation code. That's what I said before. But don't limit yourself to two as well. Really make something that reflects your concept. Store the data with associated dates into the UUID, using UUID into local storage. Give the user the ability to edit their input or something related, kind of what I showed. Process the data and present back to the user. Make sure you have all CRUD operations. So in a sense, this is a little bit of a repeat here, but I just want to make sure you understand, that's why I'm using this CRUD, because it's industry standard and it's really what we've learned. But this one throws students, right? So implement at least two examples of JavaScript code not covered in this course. So for mine, I ended up using where I mapped over my data. And actually, I ended up using the dates as well, but the Moment.js, but I used some more advanced methods than we saw in the course. So you could do that. Like if you wanted to use something in Moments.js that we hadn't covered, you could do that as well. Right. So use arrow function. So I guess before I leave this one, what I should say is, if you're in question, this is a great one to come talk to me about. Because the first thing you want to do is just get these CRUD operations working. And then if you're like, really, what would I do here? This is where, right, getting creative and thinking about, because really what I'm looking at here is how well can you venture outside of the course, teach yourself some JavaScript and implement it into your project. So use arrow functions unless you can make a case for not using them. And I would say use arrow functions in ternary and truthy and falsy. Handle application and input errors. Now this is basically a duplication of this part, but we learned in the last part that we haven't covered yet in the code along, how to handle and catch errors. And there is a specific place in the code that Andrew will show us that makes sense, but I definitely see there's at least one other place you could use to try catch paradigm. So I want to see that. 95% of your code needs to be in functions, right? Has meaningful output, follows Airbnb style guide, and uses CSS, right? So you have to have some CSS built into your, you can see in mine, like if I go back and just look real quick at mine, one thing I did is I used the, I'll show you here. If I change, what happens is when these are media queries. So what happens is when you reach a particular size, and again, you don't have to do this, but just have something that looks somewhat nice on the page. I ended up grabbing a logo. I actually simulated the idea of somebody already logged in because I didn't want to do a full login. But for a real app, for sure you would. But I simulated it by showing current users and stuff, current user, and but have something, right? Do some CSS, and I think, based on the output I've already seen, all of you did fine on that, right? Again, this time, like last, right, you'll walk me through your code as part of your review, right? Remember, if you don't do your review in time of right? You have a week to do it. Now I'm going to release, I said this before, but let me just stop before I move on to back to the attendance, right? I just want to make sure you understand is like we have seen some code. Last time I was very explicit about don't use code. And the truth is you should never use code that you can't explain in your projects for sure, right? But we've seen some design patterns in the way that Andrew used the local storage and how to render to the DOM. But you can lean into the concept of the design, but I just don't want to see his code in your output or in your project, right? Because this is your implementation. Remember, what we're doing is a little different than what Andrew did in the notes and the to-dos, in the sense that we're getting the user input, we're processing it and storing something different into local storage, right? So if I was to go over here, here's the input. Let's just say for this item is I'm only getting one input. Now I handle getting multiple inputs here, but if I go look at my inspect and I go to application, I go to here, my EV entries, right? Now this is a little hard to see because it's so small, but like here's my first one. So you can see all the data that I'm capturing, right? So that's my UUID, my location, right? So here's all the things I needed, right? And the cost was part of what I calculated. So it was these input fields, these form fields, but also some other data like cost in this case, right? Now for my other code that we've been working on, I stored a lot more in here, and I could have, but I didn't. Okay. So I'm just giving you that example. Okay, so you still need to walk me through your code as part of your code review. Remember, what I want to see from your discussion, and some of you ran into this and it kind of stumped you, so I don't want that to happen, is you want to tell me what the JavaScript is doing. Yes, it's good to describe it at just, well, here's what it's doing, but I will always ask you, give me your understanding of what that JavaScript code is doing, right, in terms of JavaScript. So where do you get that? Coming to talk to me or talking to other people, definitely helping. Talking to anybody about code will be really helpful at that point. Okay, let me go back. So that's, again, let me know if there's something more specific you want me to talk about. I'd be happy to do that. So I think that was it, all I had for dev. Right. So the one thing I want you to know here is that on this day, though, on this particular day that this item is going to be due, March 21st, and I'll put this out on Discord, will also be the day I release the code review signups. Okay. So I know some of you watch for that pretty furiously, and here they are. But we have a little more flexibility because of the Python students a week before the JavaScript students. So again, like before, this will be here. If you have any questions, hopefully by now you are familiar with this. And please do not delete lines. If you're going to change something, then just get rid of that entry. We had a case last time where somebody actually deleted something and it threw some dates off. So I haven't had time to protect. I will probably work on that before Monday when I release. Okay. All righty. All right. Talk to you soon. Bye.